I've observed another ominous moment in the inverted dark theory in this Mearsheimer uh, frenzied panic. Uh, all of a sudden, Christmas Day, Mearsheimer is coming out with multiple posts denouncing um, everything from the Venezuela to the Greenland to the Trump's dealings with the little girl who he's in the midst of the Epstein investigations. Uh, Mearsheimer in his characteristic sort of flat typewriter presentation, like, oh, I'm just giving you some kind of news report here, tells us Trump as, in a way that creeps everyone out, claimed an 8-year-old girl is so you're so beautiful or something like that. You know how these somehow condemned for being sexually attracted to his own daughter, who recently he was kind of worried about whether she was in a crowd or not. Oh, she might be there, and I can't quite see her, and I better mention to say I can't quite tell if that's Ivanka or whatever like that. But so Mearsheimer has gone really hard on this is as hard as Mearsheimer can hit. Like, basically, he's very staid. He's very disciplined. He uses a certain kind of rhetoric, and he doesn't go any further. He's hitting as hard as Mearsheimer ever hits today. So I think this is this is his first statement of the inverted dark theory of the post NSS realization that we're not going to return to normalcy. But I guess my point of engagement here is to put the diamond tip on the record at the moment. Where we grasp that what Mearsheimer is not really anxious about this moment in the sense of Nietzsche's statement that we must have chaos within if we're to give birth to the dancing star. It's rather that he acts as though there's forces of normalcy which tell us all the patterns that have to do with realist appraisal of the situation, and the realist appraisal tells us we're in the cuckoo bird stage. This is the stage where the worst, I don't know who to say. I guess he seems to picture, I mean, given the example I just gave, it's a little bit Caligula-ish somehow. It's like Caligula didn't really have interest in running the empire. He just wanted to be, declared a god and then go off to his villa in the countryside or whatever and watch small boys bathing in like porpoises in some kind of reflecting pool or something, or some kind of Roman, not a Roman bath, but more like a Roman outdoor pool in a Laudio or whatever. We see definitely a claim to grasp what's happening according to things that have already happened, and a claim of the sort of it's in a regular pattern, not an anxiousness to say, now there's this inverted dark moment. So that's what I'm saying. And here we could actually, in this time, in this type of situation, we could do things we can't do when all the Dossmann effects are totally active and can't be broken. So maybe, in a way I'm doing a Joseph Campbell type of thing. So we don't want to veer right into the Joseph Campbell, Jordan Peterson way and say, oh, then in cosmic time there's always these transcendental moments of the hot time where crisis allows you to go into the furthest deep Terence McKenna Elves regions and mold things. But Rather, we want to sort of observe what's happening, as it were. It's difficult to say what's actually happening without sort of feeling like I'm bringing Aristotle in. His energia, sort of when Aristotle thinks energia and dunamis, or actuality and potentiality, are somewhere close all the time to ousia, or availability. The correct, in English, the way to say what Heidegger means by Anwesen, or by the, as it were, the product of ousia. We went through this in some examples of the semantic field on this in Odyssey, not long ago. Noein, or this connected words to nous, the fact. We have this notion of availability. In English, it just means something is available. That's the best way to state it. And then Aristotle sort of puts his whole system on that, but he does it knowingly. Okay, that's the point. That's Heidegger's big point. He's sort of like the Greeks, culminating in Aristotle, knowingly take the path of availability as what we then found things like actuality and telos, or in Aristotle's terms, Aristotle used the word telos, but entelechia, which is bringing the thing, which sort of covers the whole circle, which covers the full circle of the telos. And this striving to do whatever it is that they do that makes them the ergon that they are, so that there's a sort of ergon, or constructor god, Platonic version at work in Aristotle in a certain sense, but at this level of nous being understood as the first law of reason, and reason as logos being closely locked into. It's sort of like in Aristotle, I guess, logos surrounds everything as reason and logic. These are two, you have to look at how the word is used, the semantic field, and then you see how this logos that originally meant probably speech. When they talk about giving a logos, like giving a speech, became logic and reason through the hierophants, through the hierophantic language, which now we have as our daily bread. That's important. The hierophantic language, the conscious language, the intervening language, the language that breaks into language as the immediate usage in immediate responsive life. People sometimes complain, well, it's hard to talk to that guy because he always has to think so much, or whatever. How can you talk to so the thing that breaks into the immediate kind of enjoyment of the direct habits of life, we find that there's a source that then changes the word logos, so now it no longer just means speech, but now it means logic, whatever logic means. And some people develop some refined version of what they think logic means. But logic, everybody grows in anyone with the normal schooling has heard the word logic. There could be some people that only know the word logic, but everybody actually almost, it's hard to, there would be a few people, they don't listen to music, they're never really exposed to media. You could see a few people that hardly would ever have any occasion to use the word logic and never thought of it. But that would be very rare, because these words come into total usage in daily life, and everyone has some version of what they mean. But these have been developed by human beings and thrust into the stream of things. So like a cat may think, oh, my owners aren't here, where have they gone? So the owners are on vacation, and then it strikes out 2 miles dead east, because it knows that the old house where they used to live is over there. A cat can do a lot of intelligent things, but it doesn't break into its dianoia. It doesn't break into it with this type of thing. But the point of Aristotle is he's broken in a way that he thinks is true. And he thinks just as simply, there's all kinds of things we just think are we should retain the knowledge of them, like how to ride a bike, but that's motor reactive. But like in a certain way, other things are just motor reactive too, even speech in a lot of ways. But Aristotle thinks, this is just the truth. Strauss comments that probably before On Nature, I read that book when I was very young, like it was probably 13 or something. That book was the Roman author is supposed to be the first case of wondering, could it be that what the Greeks are calling the good, or agathon or agathos, is actually evil. It's actually not a sound foundation. But Aristotle never really wondered that. The problem with Aristotle is more like, Aristotle's problem actually isn't at that level of founding the quote-unquote metaphysics, as it was later called. It's more at the level of the morality of the polis. That's where Aristotle has a lot of problems, and then he says, let's just do what respectable people, as they now are understood as respectable, do. Otherwise, we won't give you any argument and we'll shun you. So this is one way. And what Heidegger is basically saying is, Nietzsche's breaking into this. He's breaking into it, but does he really? He doesn't face up to it properly. So Nietzsche breaks into this. He's saying, let's go back to what we were saying. You have why do I say that Mearsheimer isn't really sufficiently anxious here? Isn't sufficiently giving birth to dancing star? It's because of reasons like, we know that there can be totally, Hannah Arendt said, for instance, totalitarian is a terrifying and wholly new form of government. So we know there can be wholly new forms of government. And I guess she thought that partially because of the rise of the so-called deep state, less sort of hysterically stated, it used to be called the bureaucratic state. And there was all this question about Chevron deference, and there was a scholarly, calm debate over it before Trump came along. It went on for decades and decades. But what we're calling the deep state, that's sort of part of what she's saying is totalitarianism is about. Another part is this expansion of everything for expansion's sake. I guess it used to be said many years ago, let's say 30 years ago, when I was very young, I remember hearing, the first thing I heard about this subject was something like, the Germans being denied an empire at home, decided they'd build one in Europe. Because, an empire abroad in Africa and with colonies. The Germans being denied an empire in the sense that the British had an empire and the Dutch and others decided, we'll make our empire in Europe. We'll colonize Europe. That's one version. Okay, but that's you ask Carl Jung and he'll tell you something psychological and quite different in a way. Which one is more important? But in any case, the point I wanted to make is these new forms of government come into existence, and today we have the accelerationist problem. So that never existed before, technological accelerationist problem. And isn't it that now we have the chance to intervene and sort of guide things in a certain way? And if the forces of normalcy cannot return, so what? We have to negotiate with the forces as they be, right? So Heidegger says we negotiate with the forces of the technological essence rather than simply put our foot down and say no more to AI or to technology more generally. But since technology, I mean, this is a big subject of Agamben and so on, is like becomes the chance, and of Nietzsche, and to become the chance of using reason, and in the way of Hayek and so on, libertarianism as a sort of reactionary force against it, that we can calculate everything, engineer the easiest. I guess that's the simplest way to think. We could be like Sam Harris and just engineer everything. I regard Sam Harris as a sort of an arch engineering mentality. Elon Musk has the engineering mentality also, but he's a little more creative, right? Whereas Sam Harris, he has engineering mentality, and he's pretty fucking stupid. And then you get somebody like Peter Thiel, sort of a mixed case, more philosophic, but it's still an engineering mentality. This idea of the engineering mentality seems to fit well with the cybernetic essence, but it doesn't quite get there. I think it doesn't quite capture the whole reality, but it sort of signals some version of the possibility of being able to count on human life because we know what's going to happen more or less, or being able to always know how to consult our tables of values in order to say, when you have this percentage chance, just this is what you do, and sort of turn it all into computable problems. I mean, leaving out what the ultimate justification for doing this is it because it pleases us so to do things this way? Utilitarian? Is it because there's this Dawes-Solon Kantian ought, that it simply ought to be and we can't ask further, sort of hyper-Kantian justification? Is it because there's nature refers to our human nature, and our human nature has a specific eternal and ultimate standing that it wants to reach, somewhat like an orange doesn't want to be in really cold temperature. It would prefer to be in the orangery, and certain if it's in sort of southern Europe in the winter or something. Otherwise, it wouldn't go to its be able to reach its sort of best state. That there's a natural perfection of the human being, as there's a natural perfection of the orange, and in terms of its moral reasoning, and then we act according to. In fulfilling this, we allow ourselves to act in accordance to cosmic nature, to the cosmos. All these different questions. When I asked the question that way, I feel like in the inverted dark theory we go a little beyond Mearsheimer, because we bring in accelerationists, we bring in the idea that there's new forces, we bring in that there's not a stable stock as sort of the ancients first set. The ancients made a foundation for analysis, but later we found that there's additions like Montesquieu, the separation of powers can be made. But and now we found out totalitarianism and other additions are possible. So there's not just this circling around. There's something that has a lot of strange factors that make realism not make sense, or it can't be dependable, because we don't know which forces are now the most. I mean, social media is involved in some major way. Lucy Hayes sort of damned me and wouldn't even allow the example of the analogy on the X being taken over by Elon Musk and people fleeing to blue sky. So Democrats are no longer comfortable there, so they flee to blue sky on countries, because if Russia were to take control of certain areas in Ukraine, what's thought is, then they'll do what Ukraine is now doing to the Russian speaker and make it hard. and make laws so that in the public offices, when you fill out paperwork, when you talk to go to the get a driver's license or whatever, you have to speak in Ukrainian. But they could switch it and say, oh, but you have to speak in Russian, and maybe they could do things to make it harder on people. And then it's not as though Elon Musk did a purge and said, oh, every Democrat will be removed from X. It became less comfortable for, I think, for the Western Alliance standard Democrats to be on X, because there was Trumpian propaganda was allowed to run riot to some extent, and there was no check on it. So I think that's when these forces that have never, so certainly these social media forces didn't exist in the time of World War II totalitarianism, and so some new form of government could come in that takes them into account. In fact, it must. So we could engage in that. We could engage in those comprehension of what's being sustained for the moment by those forces and what the potentialities are for some time for that moment. But in saying this, I want to say again, we make some incremental moves away from Mearsheimer, but we don't yet reach the confrontation between Nietzsche, Strauss, and Heidegger, where we're looking more into the basic concepts that allow us to ask, for instance, why does any of these statements make any sense, and so on, and why is it offering, or put another way, why is it offering us any guidance whatsoever? Why weren't we better to regress to being more like the wild or feral cat that just runs in this direction or that direction, but in a way before this sort of incursion of this dianoic forces, as we've shown also in the examples of Xenophon in the recent post.